How do handstands work? I mean, of all the calisthenics and gymnastics skills, handstands are probably the most well known, but by all intents and purposes, a human being should not be able to balance themselves upside down on their hands. Couple this with the crazy heights that people can take their handstands to, and it can be difficult to wrap our heads around what has to happen for a handstand to work, let alone trying to fathom how to learn how to handstand in the first place. Well, today we're going to dissect exactly this and get to the bottom of how to balance a handstand, the mechanics of how they work, and what you can do with this information to improve your own handstand whatever level you're at. Let's start by considering what muscles are worked in a handstand. And through this, we might better understand what has to become stronger for us to master it. As with all pushing exercises, the delts and triceps play a role in creating the force needed. But as for the stability to maintain the scapular elevation and continuous shoulder flexion in a handstand, this comes from the traps and the rhomboids. For all intents and purposes, a handstand is an overhead press but just an isometric. And that key word, isometric, is what I think makes people a little bit dismissive of the amount of strength needed to actually hold one. Learning how to hold this position takes time, and comparing handstands to how we stand normally is probably a good place to start. When we stand, we stack our shoulders above our hips, above our knees, above our ankles. Joints stacked one over the other in a way that demands so little energy that we may not even be aware that this is exactly what's going on. Well, a handstand works in much the same way, just upside down, and it is in being inefficient with this joint stacking that holds many would-be hand balancers back. We can stand tall for ages, but the moment we break that line and bend the knees or slouch, standing takes far more of a toll. When we handstand, arching the back or bending the arms creates a similar effect and creates far more of a strength demand. And there are two things that limit our ability to fix this issue: range of motion in shoulder flexion and our strength in that end range when we get there. These limitations do have a simple fix though, and we can improve our overhead mobility with a stretch known as the butcher's block. A technique we've discussed many times on the channel before and allows our shoulders to open by resting our elbows on a flat surface. For full details on how to perform the butcher's block, you can check out my video discussing how to improve overall overhead mobility. And in terms of building strength in that end range, once you have access to it, very little will beat the chest to wall handstand. Having the wall presents us with an opportunity to have real-time tactile feedback on what a straight handstand feels like. By squeezing the glutes, flexing the core, and more importantly, pushing as tall as we can not only develop the strength needed to do this in free space, but also use far less energy because we've got the joints stacked as we discussed before. This is a technique that I recommend you come back to regularly, even if you can handstand already, not just as a good warm-up, priming ourselves for our handstand practice, but also a really demanding isometric exercise. The traps have to work extremely hard to keep us here, and when done properly, chest to wall handstands can develop the strong base that we need to progress our handstands regardless of whatever level we're at. It is very easy to fall into bad habits, but the wall keeps us honest. Let's chat about how to balance a handstand though, because again, it follows the same traits as when we stand normally, just with a little bit more nuance. Balance in a handstand starts with the hands. I know I'm a complete philosophical genius for even saying that, but it's important for understanding how balancing works. When we stand, leaning backwards in underbalance shifts weight onto our heels, and leaning forward in overbalance shifts weights to our toes. Well, our hands aren't exactly designed for this, and an intuitive mistake that many beginners make is pressing their hands flat on the ground and just wishing for the best whenever they enter a handstand. Base of support is everything in handstands, and so by spreading our fingers out wide and flexing them, we create a more solid foundation. With this hand position, our fingers and the heels of our palms are in a better position to deal with that over and under balance. When we hit too much overbalance, we can flex the fingers to pull us more central. When we hit underbalance, we can push down with the palms of the hands to correct for this too. For those of us learning on parallettes, the concept is the same even if the execution is a little bit different. Here, our deviators do all the heavy lifting, and by squeezing and flexing the wrist, we can control how we manage our balance. The best beginner technique for solely mastering that balance aspect is the back to wall handstand, where we can kick up and by pressing our fingers into the ground, we can push away from the wall. But if we find ourselves falling too far back, we can release the pressure on the fingertips and press it in with the heels of our palms to keep us upright. This is all well and good, but how can we apply all of these different techniques in order to learn how to handstand or improve on our handstand if we can just about do it already? Well, it all comes down to practice. Without the strength to hold our body upright efficiently, practicing more kick-ups means nothing. Without the skill to negotiate maintaining the balance point, more strength means very little as well. Use the first 15 minutes of a handstand session to practice kicking up into our handstand both with and without a wall, leaning on the techniques that we spoke about earlier in order to control over and under balance. Then follow this up with strength work in chest to wall handstands. Aim to get holds north of 30 seconds where quality straight handstands are a priority. This will help us build strength in the shoulders and the traps in order to maintain the handstand proper. In terms of handstand mechanics, this is all you need to understand in order to get the best head start with handstands. Much more than this, and we could end up overcomplicating handstands very quickly. But if you are struggling with handstands and you want to break through a handstand plateau, then check out this video right here.